They're responsible.
Or are they done in by the life that opens up to them?
I don't know if all comics go through this, whether you go, I'm never going to be funny again. I don't know how I was able to go this far.
But I always assert that the funniest people aren't comedians, just like the best-looking girls aren't models or whatever. Yeah. And you'll meet people that are shoe store salesmen that are fucking knock you over.
Yeah. And then it's just my job to sit there and yell at drunks.
And that's kind of the difference between comedy and theater.
But I can do that. I'm from a large family.
It's okay if I use all that, right?
Use whatever you want. You know, here's the thing, that you could use whatever you want, because what's going to happen? That you're going to get people, they're going to not call me. They're already not calling me. So it doesn't matter what I say.
The Mexicans, the Jews, the blacks, the Irish. Not a lot of funny Germans.
It'd be much better if you were mediocre. Because if you were mediocre, then you would actually have to get good at something else, and, you know, comedy would be just something you do by the water cooler. But if you're truly brilliant at being funny, then, yeah, you can guarantee that your marriages are not going to work and your kids will turn out fucked up.
Well, this is a deep question.
Action.
All right.
Right.
What's the name of this thing?
Misery Loves Comedy.
And do you think that's true?
Well, that's the last question, so wait.
Okay.
My dad was always the funny guy of the family.
My dad made me laugh a whole lot.
My dad.
My dad. My father.
My father was probably the first guy that I said, oh man, he's funny.
It wasn't that his jokes were great, but I could see the silliness, and I saw that how much fun he was having making other people laugh.
And he always had a ton of basic down the middle street jokes, and I would see him kill. He loved, can I swear?
Please, yes.
He also loved shit jokes and fart jokes, so I still don't like him because that's my rebellion. He told me, he said, if you swallow gum, your shit comes out like a yo-yo. And I didn't find out until years later that he was lying. He would just make up these crazy stories about my life. He said, there's this Pakistani dish called biryani, that's my favorite. And he said, oh, it's because when you were a little baby, we dropped you in a part of it when we forgot. And I didn't know until I was 13 that that was a lie, because it was just part of my reality. I was like, oh yeah, that's what happened to me. And he was like, no, I was just trying to impress your mom. He was flirting with my mom. I'm like...
As you were 5 years old, he was flirting with your mom.
Yeah. I was like, I think it's in the bag. I'm 5. I think you got this one. So yeah, my dad was always very funny.
My dad and I don't really get along that well. He's actually a stepdad and was not supportive at all of the career. In fact, at one point, I played ukulele in my act and did very well. Got on television doing it, the whole thing. But I remember the first time I played the ukulele for him, he just looked at me and was like, what the hell do you think you're going to do with that? But I did have so many teachers, especially there's a teacher named Mr. Beasley, a psychology teacher, and he was just like, Wayne, you really got something. You're funny in class, you're not disruptive, you're smart, you should try this. You should definitely try this. I was like, oh.
So she was always like, yeah, this is never going to happen. You're insane. I don't know what you're doing. Nobody knows what you're doing. My father was pretty low-key about it. My father was like, you happy? Good. My father was a lot fucking smarter about it.
My dad was funny, but not in the way that he thought he was funny. So he would try to tell a joke or tell a joke that he thought was funny, and then he would laugh very loudly at the end of the joke. And everyone around the table would you'd hear the clink, clink, clink of the cutlery as the joke didn't land. And then you'd think, please, I don't want to catch anyone's eye, because if I do, I'm just going to go.
She came to the show 2 hours early and stood in the lobby and introduced herself to every person who came in. Hi, I'm Blanche Lewis. I'm his mother. Hi, she's coming to see my son. So everyone knew her, and she sat right in the middle of the theater. So I say, so my father, he had 6 penises. I'm just saying something dumb. And she would literally, I don't want to get out of shot, she'd stand up and go, oh, Bill never had 6 penises. How dare you? It was absolutely the oddest show. Because they all went, boo, you're putting your dad down. Well, no, it was a joke before she showed up.
HBO used to do a thing in Bryant Park where you face the library, and they would have comics on stage, live, and no censorship during afternoons in the summer. My mother and father happened to be in for that, and the place is packed. And it's spectacular to be able to yell the word fuck and throw it out and have it hit the library and bounce back at you. It's like heaven. And the crowd was great. And I finished up and my mother goes, "Oh my God, they really do like you."
There's always a bit of judgment. That was funny. Almost like a comic. Like, I know, but you should have laughed. Oh, I was thinking about it. If there was any ways to improve it. I just did Letterman last week. I found no room for improvement. It's always the first thing. However, you can tell David Letterman, if you have a chance, I don't know if he's talkative, that set is too busy. I mean, why are you standing in front of New York City? What is that? There should be a nice curtain that goes with your outfit. Well, you let me get right on that.
By the way, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. That's the frustrating part. He's not wrong.
If you change your mind, you can always go back to Conan, right? I mean, that was literally within the 10 seconds of his first reaction was, when the world beats you to shit, you can come back with your tail between your legs, can't you? And I said, yeah, but that's not really kind of what I'm focused on right now, Dad. Now, one could make the case that he was right. I came crawling back after being chewed up and spit out by this goddamn town.
But I would just like you for once to go, that was great. But there's always a criticism. Okay, so we're not allowed. So should I say something nice first and then I can say something? That'd be nice. That's a start. Let's start there. But then it comes out as Irish sarcastic. Well, your jeans fit great.
Acceptance has been a big part of dealing with who he was. And realizing very early in life that I was far from perfect made it a little bit easier, but not much. And there's a whole nother layer to it. It's like when you're a junior, you're really just a statue built to honor that which walked before you, right? Like, your name is his. You're going to do what he was going to do, and there's not a discussion. And as my grandfather said before he passed away, you're gonna fix what he fucked up. And so whether that's rightful pressure or not, that's pressure. So
how old are you when he says that?
I was 15 years old, 15. He told me he was proud of me. He was sick and he was in hospice care at that point. And he said, Freddie, did you clean your room today? I said, yeah, Papa, I cleaned my room. He said, I'm very, very proud of you. So, and you're 15, you don't realize he's saying it for everything, but he's too much of a man to say it, right? I go, yeah, okay, no problem. And he goes, you know, your father really fucked things up. What? He goes, and it's your job to fix it. 4 hours later, he was dead. I literally was just like, I gotta get into acting. I saw Neil Patrick Harris that summer getting people excited for acting in my high school, and was like, I gotta do this shit.
98% of kids suffer from, hey, look at me, desperate for attention. Is there a way to explain why any of us actually chooses, hey, look at me, as a career? Oh, I'm going to devote the rest of my life to being the center of attention.
Those early teens where you get to sort of hang out with your father and his friends, you know, occasionally, and just sort of getting a sense of their kind of adult humor and just seeing little glimpses of it. They were still moderating it for the kids, but you could see between the cracks there was something a little bit more edgy there and a little bit naughtier, and the bad language was kept to a minimum, but you know, you could see it was brewing, and that the off-color subjects were in the air. I remember that being very tantalizing, you know, kind of wanting to hang with them, sit in the pub garden, because I wasn't allowed in the pub, but sitting in the pub garden with them and, you know, eating a bag of crisps and kind of excited. And so that excitement of when do I get to be part of that?
And it was this dynamic of the laughter. You'd hear, like, as a kid, I'm just hearing like, and you'd hear this rumbling laughter, and I was completely taken by it, fascinated. And it was some of these relatives from the past that really got me like, okay, this is something going on here. And it was alcohol. That's what I realized. It was the booze.
I was sitting around the table, and from a very, very young age, I always dominated the conversation. It was the one place that, like, I fucking hung out in. I could hang out forever because people were laughing. And that was like every Sunday or every Friday or every time we would have like a big meal where everybody was there. For some reason, they would always be laughing at me, and I would be telling stories about, sometimes it was like, you know, terrible things, you know, like I got beat up a lot when I was a kid, and like my sister thought it was hilarious. You know, I remember one time, and she was like, "Oh my God, how many times did Dominic DePinto kick your ass this week?" And I'd be like, "It's not funny, all right?" And I'd start to cry, and then I'd turn it into a joke, and like it would turn into like a bit or something.
I don't remember a lot making the family laugh. It's more that I would laugh a lot at the family. Yeah, I would laugh a lot at my uncle's jokes and comedy shows and things like that. And it was the feeling of that made me interested in comedy, I think.
Right. It was quite a while before you consciously made the decision to try to make
a joke.
Yeah.
Yes.
how much later? How old?
My first joke was I was a late joker. My first joke was at 21.
Seriously?
No, I don't know.
Great.
I just like telling stories. I would have my family sit around, and I would be like, guys, I have this story. You have to hear it. And they'd be like, ugh. And I would just make up a story as I went along, a horrible story just about like fake, like animals. I'd be like, so this rabbit just was in the forest, and they were just like, we know you're making this up as you go along, and it's not good. And my dad would film it, and then we'd watch it, and I'd be like, oh my God, this girl's gonna make it. So it was definitely for me personally, because I really don't know about kids on purpose, but for me personally, my narcissism and thinking that I deserved attention was reinforced by my parents.
Every kid makes up knock-knock jokes, but it takes kids a long time to understand it. They'll still try it.
Right.
They'll make up their own rules, and they're funny because they've got the idea wrong.
You know, I actually was a very, very shy kid, and I don't think I was funny until I left home, and so that's what my parents are still surprised. They're like, "What is happening? Why are you on Letterman?"
There's something about family and that connection, and then to have that secret kind of sense of humor together, where the same goofy shit makes you laugh. Like, everyone loves my dad's political stuff and his serious sledgehammer stuff. I love his goofy shit. I love the little moments where he's just got a phrase in between even two bits, and he'll just say a little something about Uncle Fred or something, or Steve or Dave, just a little something, and that's like the humor we shared, was that little stuff. And I do have a memory of, I guess it was like junior high. I think we were at Gelson's. First one's Gelson's first came out, and we decided to do, it just came up, a whole produce section in gibberish. We had an argument over the tomatoes in gibberish. We ended up singing some sort of gibberish folk song together and just improvised and played. And for me, that's like one of my most joyful moments with him.
It's the fun part about being a dad, because there's nothing funnier than a little kid really hitting it right. And so my son, I remember, as he would try to do a joke in the room, when he was like 5, he'd try to do a joke, he'd look at me, he'd go, "It didn't land, did it?" I'm like, "No, it didn't land." It didn't land.
Take your desk, take your chair, sit in the hallway. And I'd sit in the hallway of an elementary school. And people, teachers would walk by and they go, "Why are you out here?" And I go, "Because I killed in there."
If you were making a movie about somebody who became a stand-up comedian and you put this into it, people would go, "It's a little on the nose." The only way I could get attention as the fifth of 6 was to do my bits. And literally, my dad would have his friends over, and I would get out of bed and come down, "Do Nixon." And I would do it, and I was 7, 8 years old.
I mean, there's an old picture of me, wearing Groucho glasses and, holding a bottle of booze. And, they used to have a little bar area in their den, and I'd go back there. I'd try to make, what he used to tell me to do is like, because he sold, appliances, he was always on the cutting edge of things. And, I think he was one of the first guys to have his television in a wall. So the TV in the den was in the wall, and the closet was behind it, so the back of the TV was there. And I would go in the closet, and I would stand behind the TV, and my grandfather would go, "You're on the television! I see you on the television!" He was a very funny fella.
There was a moment when I was little in elementary school when I realized I'm not good at sports, and this is a daily humiliation. They would pick sides. I'd get picked last after the girls, after disabled kids, and it happened every day, twice a day, in gym class and at lunch. And I just remember putting rocks up my nose and pretending I was a slot machine and having people like pull my arm down and then opening my nostrils so rocks fell out. That was, I don't think that made me any cooler, but at the time it seemed like a good strategy to distract from the fact that I was not a good soccer goalie.
And then I started doing impressions of people, you know, around the same time, like junior high. And that's the first time I ever thought of myself being funny that way.
Probably around when I was 15, that's when I realized, like, I'm good at this. I can do this.
I just annoyed people endlessly from then on. It was just way too much fun. And I couldn't understand why people would be upset. Like, I was pretty relentless.
So I could even just pick one person out from the crowd of kids, and I would try to crack that person and make them laugh, you know? I knew if I could make this kid Damien laugh, that everyone would be like, oh yeah, he killed it.
But I thought I was a nice kid. In my heart, I looked at myself as a nice, sweet kid. So when a guy would frown or, you know, even seem sad, I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? This is funny. You're a 12-year-old guy and you have breasts. I mean, come on. What's not funny about that?
And you know, once you kill, you want to like leave the room. You have a great joke. You're like, oh, that was great. Like, I gotta get out of here now. It's like, because that was so funny. And
you were aware of you need to exit after the laugh?
Get out. Because if you stay too long, it's like, you want me to do that bit again?
I don't remember how I found this out, but I could make a sound that was essentially a ventriloquism sound that the teacher thought was coming from another place.
Like another student? Or just another place in the room?
Another student or another, yeah. And I don't know to this day, I know conceptually what ventriloquism is, but at the time I just came upon this. And I could make this sound. I'll make the sound. It might be just warning the sound people, which was, if I can still do this, I don't do this anymore, I should tell you, because... So,
what the hell?
The teacher would do that, and the teacher would throw a kid out, not me. It wasn't really even for attention, because I wasn't getting attention. It was more for, I guess I couldn't come to grips with the idea that they were trying to teach something.
I would go to where they were with an enormous tape recorder from the AV squad. And I would lie and say it was a real radio station. And when I got there, a child, had just shown up. And they would realize they got duped. But they would talk to me anyway because they were really nice. And I would just say to Seinfeld, how do you write a joke? And I would force him to walk me through it. Or I interviewed Harold Ramis, how do you write a movie? And those interviews changed my life because they really told me. It was my college. I had to my college in junior year of high school. I was just so obsessed. So I thought, I'm going to try to interview every original writer from Saturday Night Live. So I interviewed Al Franken and Tom Davis and...
You can't just call these people up.
Well, what would happen is someone would be nice, like Alan Zweibel. I'd interview him, and then he would take out the phone book and say, I'm going to hook you up with this person. And he would start giving me all the phone numbers. And I was obsessive. I was always trying to get Andy Kaufman, but I couldn't get him because at the time he was down south wrestling. And I would call his management office, and they would say, we don't even know where he is. He's off the grid. He was off the grid before there was a grid.
And then I was watching Richard Pryor with my parents on HBO. It was live in concert from Long Beach. And that was when I knew, like, oh, that's what you do with being funny. And I remember being amazed that my parents and I were enjoying the same thing so much. That's the first time I can remember me saying that's what I want to do as far as it related to my family. I mean, as far as my own quirky, weird shit. I mean, I've been a little pervert my whole life. I've had that whole weird addictive personality thing since very, very early childhood. And being funny was just it was also a way to balance out people picking on you. Nobody fucked with you if you were funny because they were scared you'd mock them. It's the one thing I could do to a football player that he couldn't do to me.
I started doing drugs when I was 15. I started doing drugs heavily. So I went to rehab when I was 16. And I got out of rehab, and like all my friends that I hung out with just ignored me. They never called me anymore. I lost my entire friend base. So my grades were so bad that I took theater to get an easy A. I'm like, it's the easiest A I can take. So I do that, and I do a monologue that was comedic. We would put on plays for the entire school, and it was like super Def Jammy. So like people would like boo and like throw stuff, and we did this play that we had written, and I was one of the leads, and I came out and just completely had the entire theater just destroyed, rolling, like just murdered with this character. And like to the point, I mean, people were like lost it. And my teacher was just like, I walked off stage and she was like, there's way more here than you're seeing. She's like, you gotta like, so I joined an improv group and just started like getting into comedy. But it kind of like comedy took over for what the drugs did for me. I just was so obsessed with drugs, and then that was gone, and so I just completely threw myself into comedy.
You're controlling this whole room. You're like a drug dealer. You're giving them this drug that's making them feel really good all at once.
From the time I was a kid and I got addicted to people looking at me, it's like the reason I want to do that for work is because you get addicted to that feeling. You get addicted to that immediate high. I mean, that's why people become addicted to sex or drugs or alcohol, because it gives you what you want or what you think you want. And with this, it's a healthy way to get love or whatever it is that we call it. But it's a constant, it's like an adrenaline. You know, there's nothing like getting a laugh from people. It's a really weird, addictive high, whether it's on a stage or just it's a weird power thing, which there's no other way for me to achieve that. There's no other way for me to feel that, and nothing else can compare to that. So what kind of job would I do? That I would go to work all day and be miserable, because no job is gonna compare to that feeling. So I think that was why I had to keep doing it, because I'm always chasing that feeling.
How did that feel?
I'm sorry.
When you finally had
crack cocaine.
Yeah.
Rock cocaine.
Because?
Big rock cocaine. Because when you're alone and you're solo up there and you can modulate them and you get the laughs and you can build on it, you can go back and forth, and the power of like calling back something and having them, it's like you're the one-man show, and the adrenaline and blood shoots through your head in a way that I think is identical to crystal meth.
Yeah.
I would do gigs. I would do a shot at 12:30, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I still can't figure out why I'm not asleep, because it had just shot through. You know, the adrenaline shoots through you.
I feel like comedy is a drug in a weird way, and I don't know what it's a gateway to, but doing more drugs? It's hour-long specials? Hour-long drugs? What does it lead to? A sitcom of a nightly thing? I mean, it is. It really is, and it's a buzz, and you go, I got to get that again. I mean, you go to another club the same night, because you go, I did this club already.
Yeah.
I did all these drugs here.
That's old.
So now let's go to another place where there's more drugs.
That's old porn.
That's old porn. Yeah, that's old porn. I want to go to a place. I need some fresh.
It is a drug, you know. And the closest thing, when you have a moment of either hilarity or vulnerability on stage, or something it's the closest thing I've ever come to, even an acting class of spirituality, where you kind of like anything, and I hate that I'm even saying that word, but like of any kind of like.
But it's that powerful.
It is that powerful. It's the closest thing I've had to, you know, like people speaking in tongues or whatever, and having that enlightened feeling. When you have a moment on stage or in film but especially on stage, where you're in front of a live audience,
It's only happening in that moment.
Yeah, and it's like bang, and it's a feeling of enlightenment, feeling of freedom, liberty. Yeah.
It took a big chunk of time for me to discover it, to discover that silence is the root of all comedy, that's where it lays, because all silence did was panic me. So if there was silence, it meant they weren't laughing or they were contemplating how to kill me.
I don't think there's any bigger thrill in comedy than when knowing a big laugh's coming up and they don't know. When you've got that little secret where you're like, in a second, you're going to be laughing. And maybe they're uncomfortable, or maybe not. I have a routine where I took a friend of mine with muscular dystrophy to a brothel, and there's this moment just before the woman sucks the disabled guy off on stage where they're all going, this is horrible, and I have a punchline that's going to zing. And that for me, silence is, sometimes when you watch, do you ever watch like movies being made and you can tell the editing when you can tell jokes where you go, that joke worked, but you cut it off too quick. And someone who was editing it went, well, that joke's over, boom.
You can gauge what you know when the laughter is going to come. You get that response built in so that when you're in the vacuum of an audience, you know, you understand timing, you understand the fundamentals.
Comedians, you know, you have certain laugh ears. You can hear. That's where you're listening to the audience, and that's where some, you know, new comedians that, you know, they bomb and they come off stage and they're like, that was pretty good. And you're like, you know, they have no laugh ears, right? I just have the approach of never give them a second. Never give them a second to, it's like someone's off balance. That's the best time to hit someone, right? They're like, that's kind of, we all have friends where you sit there and you talk to them and you know they're just thinking of what they're going to say. They're not even listening. That's what comedians do.
You know, you walk off stage and you're at the bar and you're not in magic anymore. And then it's almost like when I would walk off, like the spell is broken. And then I realize I'm a fucking zilch, and then they realize it again, like, oh, God, we allowed him to control us?
We got involved in a dangerous situation, you know, doing drugs and then being just constantly working and not dealing with it. And the one thing about Mitch is weird is a lot of people view comics as, especially someone that, you know, dies tragically like Mitch did. And, you know, drugs, it comes with all these thoughts. And a lot of people think it's something about Mitch is he didn't really have that kind of negative side. In a fucked up way, it was almost his downfall. Right. Like, I would say, Mitch, we can't do this anymore. Like, and Mitch wasn't stupid. It wasn't fun anymore. Doing an opiate isn't fun after it isn't fun anymore. Right.
Who's the pumpkin chick, Cinderella, whichever one that turned into a pumpkin. Like, that's what it's like. Yeah, I'm a fucking zilch again. Ugh. I would come off stage in Hartford, Connecticut, or whatever shithole I had done, you know, and I was just drinking my water, and I'm still the same frightened idiot. And I'm like, I have to go back on to achieve that.
Definitely a certain point in my life where I was at ease most on stage in front of strangers, as opposed to being with anyone I knew. I would just not that I was antisocial, I don't know, but I looked forward to getting on stage. I was like, that's where I really can be loose and have fun, and you know, I just love doing that. I mean, now I have a talk show where I just talk to strangers, people I haven't met.
A healthy person probably looks around and says, it's a wonderful world full of wonderful things. And a non-healthy person says, I want people to think I'm one of the wonderful things. I want people to be glad that I live on Earth. I need to hear it. Rather than just think, oh, isn't it wonderful to have people like that who exist to entertain me? You go to a place of, how do I become that person? That someone else will feel that way about me, you know? That's what I guess separates healthy people from non-healthy people.
There's a protective element, I think, that we all kind of share with one another, because no one knows but us what we go through. The insecurity and the childishness, the gaping hole that can only be filled with the love of strangers, laughter every 15 to 30 seconds, that is something that unless you do it, you don't know. No manager knows it, even if they're a real astute, empathetic manager, and there are such people. No agent knows it. I do this every night. Every night. 300, I work, 250, 300 nights a year. And so don't tell me.
It's failure.
Yeah.
I think it's failure is what it is. And the whole thing, all these 27 years of me doing stand-up have been a fluke. And today's the day that they all figure it out and you walk out there and it's the first time you've ever, and you're never funny again.
Well, I think everyone can be funny, but not when they want. You know, that's sort of the trick. Well, sometimes when people want to be funny and they try, and it's a little painful. But
the fact that they can try, that's the thing that, to me, that dilutes it, because at a party, nobody dabbles in dentistry. But everyone can, if they want, choose to dabble in comedy. They can be horrible,
right?
But they can at least do it.
That's true.
That annoys
That's
the hell
true.
out of me.
Well, I think everyone's capable of being funny at some point or another, you know. I think, and I'm definitely, I think every actor is capable of being funny. I really do.
The first person from my real life that made me laugh really hard, Dan Rather, I guess, is the first guy who really made me sort of have that I think I'm going to throw up laugh when he switched from suits to sweaters.
When I did stand-up, I always thought, I'm just some fucking idiot. Why would you sit and listen to me talk for 20 minutes? I didn't have that confidence that I could do some great George Carlin monologue that would inspire people. And it took me another decade to feel that in my movies I could open up my heart and tell people what I felt about being alive, and that it was worthy of being told. And the moment I realized that I can open up and that it is okay to share my way of looking at the world with other people, then my career took off.
I got to see Richard Jeni. You know, I always loved Peter Sellers.
An early Peter Sellers.
You know, or even Phyllis Diller. Like, those kind of threw me more than
Stephen Wright,
who gets on and is so quiet and withdrawn.
Dennis Miller's second special, Black and White.
Bill Cosby and whatnot. And watching that master, watching Johnny Carson and seeing
the Woody Allen movies and then the Steve Martin specials.
Steve Martin.
I wanted to be
the greatest stand-up with the most weapons in history.
Because I thought then I could be the right kind of Lenny Bruce funny.
And that's something that Adam Sandler, really ingrained in me.
I saw Spencer and went, who are these guys? How come they're making fun of us in a way that's really accurate? And when I was doing Alan Partridge, there's a bit in it where I steal from Michael McKean. There's a scene in it where I say something like, who do you think you are? And what I'm seeing is, there's a scene where Michael McKean, when Christopher Guest comes in, says, I've come to replug your life support machine. I've come to, we can do a tour of Japan. Our single, Sex Farm, is a big hit in Japan. And he goes, oh, so you come to replug our life support systems, you know. The fucking nerve that you display. I use that sometimes.
When we first started making The Office, I was walking down the street with Ricky Gervais, and Steve Coogan was coming the other way, and I was very excited and but slightly daunted, and I have this weird thing when I meet people I admire that I don't want to seem like a fawning idiot, you know? I want to seem I don't want to give them, I just could be effusive and talk about how great they are. I feel like that just will seem vulgar or kind of ass-kissy or something, you know? And so I have this thing which is to sort of be slightly a little bit cheeky, we're comedians, you know, and, you know, I'll have a little dig at you, and you have a little dig at me, but it's all done with good humor. And Coogan comes out and he introduces himself to both of us, and he's very sweet, and he says, oh, I've seen your show, The Office, and I'm a big fan. And he said, if my career is ever on the skids, I'd love you to write something for me. And my mouth, I just went, well, you better get in touch now then. But for no reason, his career was going from strength to strength. It was just, what? And he sort of went, and he sort of was, and Ricky was just looked at me like, that's a weird, and I would, obviously you don't, your career's going so good that you don't, it's ironic, I'm saying it was absurd, you don't need to get in touch, and he went, right, and they kind of tried to have a conversation for a little while. And then he went, sorry, what did you mean? I went, I'm sorry, what I meant was, your career is clearly great, so you don't need to get in touch with us, but why would you say that? No, but yeah, and it just fizzled out, you know, and we just went off into the day. And I've never really been able to, you know, had the opportunity to sort of explain myself or apologize to him. I just thought, what a dick.
I'd like to be able to try and make a point, and then still be able to tell a joke about fucking getting shit on your dick or whatever, right? And I love that Carlin could say something so precise and so well, and then now I'm going to talk about farts for 5 minutes. He had the same hard line when it came to farting, which I don't know if that makes sense, but as I said, I only became a huge fan of Carlin when I realised how hard it was to be really good at this.
Groucho. Not so many people talk Zeppo or Chico, but I loved Harpo. Because Harpo to me was insane, and there was an unpredictable nature. He'd just, be cross-examined to the passport guy, and he'd just jump on the thing and start, doing the pins like it was a plane. And then start chasing women. And I thought, this guy, because I don't know, literally, there's no way I can look away for 5 seconds because I'll miss some transition.
Lenny Bruce decides that kind of philosophical, honest speech is going to be called stand-up comedy. And right from that moment, you've created Pryor and Carlin. We don't know who they're going to be, but they have to happen.
I remember seeing Richard Pryor on an Ed Sullivan show.
Yep.
In which the routine was about the toughest kid in school. And for no reason at all, the toughest kid in school would point out and say, "You, after school, I'm going to bite your foot off." And you'd have to believe him because he'd be walking around with the big shoe hanging out of his mouth. I mean, that was his routine for Ed Sullivan show. Yeah. The actual routine was, "You, after school, I'm going to bite your dick off." And you had to believe him because he walked around with a dick hanging. I mean, it was pretty fun when you realize that.
I mean, my favorite is Richard going to Africa and sitting in the coach with the African guy. And he says, the man smell, and he does this thing, and it was like, whoo, and this whole, and it was like, oh, I'm watching the smell, I can see it. But then he says, and then I looked at him, and he was like, ooh, you stink too. And I thought, oh, okay. And I understood.
Richie Pryor, who had a big acting career, did his greatest acting in his stand-up, where he would break your heart and involve you in story. I mean, and you can see it in his concert films. It's extraordinary, realistic acting. And with movies, he just didn't give it that kind of dimension that he did to his stand-up.
Richard was in love with Pam Grier, okay, like every guy was in the 70s. And he got his hands on an old tape of some of my dad's stuff that wasn't so funny, that wasn't that good. They sit down and Richard says, "Oh, I got some stuff. Y'all gotta hear this. This is some great shit." And he starts playing some of my dad's old material. And my dad's getting hot, right? He's kind of shitting all over him. My dad finally just says, "Fuck this." And he gets up and he lays out Richard, takes both girls and splits. Now, I'm not lying. I didn't make this story. This story was told to me by Growing Pains, by Joanna Kearns, man. Like, I'm sitting in the trailer, and about right near the end of the story, I think she realizes, oh shit, he was married and this is his son, and goes into this reserved kind of, but he was a very sweet man.
The news came on and they said that Freddie Prinze had just killed himself. A comic could make so much of a big splash in this world, and so many people are affected by somebody who makes them laugh. It's an important job. And for some reason, his passing was the thing that sent me out to LA.
I was in Rochester, New York. I was an absolutely nobody, part-timer, just jack of all trades, would do whatever the radio station asked of me. And one day, Sam Kinison walked in. The mic went on, and he just spoke his mind. And he was outrageous, he was funny, he was sensitive at times. And a light bulb went off in my head where I realized, oh my God, I could do this different. Just, you gotta just be yourself. And just, I started blowing off everything I knew about radio after that day.
I think the only vision I had of it, and many people I believe say this, is of the Dick Van Dyke Show and the writer's room of Buddy and Sally and Rob Petrie thinking of ideas.
I used to sit home and I used to watch it, and I look at this guy, Rob Petrie, and he was married to Mary Tyler Moore. He had a very nice house up in New Rochelle. He had a kid named Richie, and he spent his days at work lying on a couch, just joking around with Buddy and Sally. And I went, I think I want to do that.
I feel like that I had a vision of, oh, I'll write. Somehow I'll get in an office. But I think it was more, I just want to be around people who do comedy or say funny things. As I got older, when Letterman came on in high school, then I had an idea. I would like to write for the Letterman show and live in New York. But it's not like I had a talent for it. Or, you know what I mean? Like, excuse me, I have tuberculosis. I don't think it's contagious. Kevin Pollak, who is not sitting here with me. Kevin Pollak.
I think it is.
No, it might be.
Contagious.
I might have to take the waters.
It took me 3 years to get on stage for the first time. And the reason why I finally got on stage was that there was a contest. It's always a contest. So the prize was a check for $200 and the opportunity to perform at the DC Improv.
The thing that I worried about when I first started doing stand-up was whether or not I was crazy enough to be a comedian, because I didn't really understand what being a stand-up... I mean, I was doing sets in comedy clubs for almost a year before I realized there's guys that you haven't even heard of who don't have a day job, who are just doing comedy clubs. I didn't know that was a thing that could happen. I thought, I'm going to the club where Robin Williams started, and someone's going to see me like they saw him, and then I'm going to be in a TV show. That's what I thought was going to happen.
And I said to the club manager, I said, I want to do this again. When can I do it? And they handed me a mop, and they said, well, there's no spots available, but if you run food to tables and sell tickets and things like that, then we'll keep you in mind for fallouts and cancellations. And so I kicked around the DC Improv for about 3 or 4 years. And eventually I was opening for people like Brian Regan and Jake Johansson and Mitch Hedberg and these incredible comics who taught me everything about comedy. It's about immersion. It's about living. Like when I worked at the DC Improv, I was there all the time. I was there the nights I worked. I was there the nights I didn't work. I went to every show. I saw comedians who were nothing like me. I saw Larry the Cable Guy and Rodney Carrington, people who you think you have nothing in common with, but really comedians have everything in common.
Cab driver, paralegal, private chauffeur, stuff like that. And I'm lost. I'm a lost soul,
In New York?
Yes, a lost soul. Parents beside themselves.
What are we going to do?
Yes.
Went to university.
I would overhear conversations that were heartbreaking, terrible.
About you?
Yeah, about me, yeah. What are we going to do?
What's he going to do with himself?
They send me to a psychiatrist,
Sure.
And so I take the subway to Brooklyn to the psychiatrist, and what do you go? What is it? He can't do anything for me.
No.
So then I don't know how or why I thought of this, but I decided to take an acting class.
When I saw Bob Odenkirk and David Cross for the first time, I was like, oh, they're doing what I could do. That's my sense of humor, and they're making a living at it. Maybe I could do this. I always assumed no one, because I grew up as a terrible nerd who was considered to be ugly and undateable. So,
Chapter 1.
So I used humor, but when you are ugly and undateable, the thing that people say to you when you're trying to be funny is stop trying to be funny. You're not funny. At 25, I saw other comedians doing the stuff that I thought I was funny at, so I did it, and within a week of performing comedy for the first time, I now was a comedian. And I told people I'm a comedian, and people went, oh, that's why you act the way you act. Oh, you're funny.
We do come from the misfit island of toys, so we should be kind of weird looking. I try and communicate that to my children. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being weird. It's a very strange, because I wish someone would have told me that, because I feel like that's something culturally that we kind of toss around, but really being different is good.
So I guess, and I know this has been talked about before, and it's a lot more open in society. I know Jonathan Winters talked about it in the 60s, but being in a psych ward, like I that was just to talk about that, like that was like a really, I felt very ashamed of that. And then to now, you know, in stand-up, you say it the first time and it's like, your voice is kind of, you know. Yeah. And then like 10 times in, it's like, so you're in the psych ward, as you do, and you know, you get so much more relaxed about it. And then finally, it's like you can talk about it with anybody.
Yeah.
And that has been a real gift to me. To that the art form allows is like you can talk about anything.
I'd like to go on.
On a Saturday night?
On a Saturday night. He said, who are you? I said, I'm in the audience. He said, have you ever done comedy before? I said, no. He said, no, you can't go on. He said, you have to audition, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think I got into it because I was essentially narcissistic or even that I was looking for love. Like, I feel like I got into stand-up because, you know, I needed to be seen. And I thought that, like, that stage, I can do whatever I want. Whatever I want. The only context is you should get laughs. Should. That's even conditional, depending on how much you're being paid. And if you're not being paid at all, you can do whatever you want. You can yell, you can spit, you can tell people to fuck themselves. It's great. You can do that publicly, you know, in front of you. But I think that, like, for me, it was just a matter of, like, you know, I felt that I had something to say, and I thought that comedy, for me, when I watched it when I was a kid, I was like, these guys have a handle on things. They can take life and just, you know, turn a few phrases, and, like, they got a handle on it, and you learn things, you see things in a different way, and they seem to be, you know, in control of this horrendous, you know, hurricane of bullshit that comes at us every day. And I think that's what appealed to me, is like, how can I get a voice that somehow can manage life and be seen kind of like I exist and I have things to say.
It's easily the single craziest thing that I have ever done in my life was going up to Bud, asking him to go on. Thank God he said no.
You have to nourish a delusion, you know, to sort of, you know, make your way to keep pushing in show business. You really have to nourish a delusion. And what's frightening, I think, sometimes is that, you know, people don't know when to stop. You know what I mean? It's like...
comedy intervention.
Yeah, but does that really exist? And how can you break somebody's heart? You know, their heart's going to break on their own, or it's not.
Here's the evolution of it, I think, is first, I want you to like me. Then I want you to tell me that I'm normal. And then, listen, can I tell you guys about this thing that happened to me? And the relief of, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. That's happened to me too. And I think the older you get, the more mature you become, the more you really feel that connection. Even if they're just sitting there in silence during the setup, you really feel that we are just talking here and we understand each other. And it's not so much about me being understood. It's about we understand each other.
This is a horrible thing, but my dog died from a thing that I did. Like, I removed a ramp from the backyard to the front yard and I forgot to put it back, and she extreme sportsed it 3.5 feet to her death. And I felt terrible about that, and I do a whole shtick about it. But the great thing is like, after shows, people will be like, I sat on my rabbit. Like, you know, like, I squeezed my hamster too hard. I thought I was hugging it. Oh, yeah, okay, right. Like,
You become a safe haven.
yeah. Like, just, like, it doesn't become this private, horrible thing.
And it took me years to really understand that's what you're doing. You have the desire to control an audience, or is it the desire to connect? Is it a desire to say, hey, we're all together, I'm part of you, I got in there, we have a recognition, we know each other. And thereby, I go, okay, I do know who I am.
There's two kinds of laughs. There's the kind of laugh you get when you do a good gag and do it well, and the audience laugh. And then there's the other gag, the other kind of joke you do where you say something which reveals a truth about the way men behave or the way women behave, or something that everyone in the room acknowledges as true, all at the same time. And they laugh, and their laugh is a laugh of recognition, and that kind of laugh comes from the gut, because they're laughing because they go, You just shine a light on what it is to be human.
You could, walk into a note session and you could threaten to walk off a movie if you change one frame of that gag, because I am sure that this works and I will not change it. It ruins the character. If you don't understand what movie we're making, this is something that's important to me. And I will go to the mat on this one. You show it to an audience. If it doesn't get a laugh, you're back in the editing room. Okay, let's blow this thing up. What do we do here? Let's recut it. Anybody have any ideas?
And that's, I guess, our greatest success is creating that image in their brain. If it's a story piece, and they can see it, hear it, taste it, smell it, and then boom,